Alrighty, welcome everyone. So today we're going to use a mold like this one here that is unfired. Looks like a little loaf of bread. I put this together the other day. It's solid. You can see there's nothing really to do. What's really great about these molds is if you have clay that you don't know where it came from, you can use this clay and make unfired hump molds. So what I did was I started with just a ball of clay, and you can see round makes round. So if my hand is flat, it's going to be flat. So a lot of times folks will want to make a sphere or make a ball for like a pinch pot, and they'll start flat. This function, I'm actually wanting the ball to be flat so I can kind of elongate it out so it's a little mini loaf of bread. I'm just going to pat it around, and then once it's starting to take that shape, I'm going to squish down a little bit to flatten it out. I want to remember just the ultimate shape that I want the bowl or the piece to look like. And that top shape, that when I'm forming here, that actually is going to become the interior shape of your future piece. So you want that to be really, really smooth. No canvas marks, no marks, anything that you leave on there will show. So I'm starting to take and roll the piece on either side just to smooth out that edge so it's even. So it's more squared, kind of like the original one that has straight sides. This one's going to be a little bit more rounded, a little bit more chubby. And then I'm going to smooth it as much as possible. So I'm just going to spend a lot of time and really focus my attention on making that top part smooth. If your clay is too soft, it's just going to push around and you're going to peel it off. So you might need to let it set up for a little bit, but sometimes there's that right perfect texture of the clay that you can just really use your hand and really smooth it out almost better than you can a rib. That's where that's at right now. Just going to keep attention to that and keep working on it. So I'm going to fast forward here for a little bit. So one thing that's really awesome about using these unfired clay molds is, say you have clay from a different studio, or you can't remember if it's low fire clay and you don't want to mix it in with your high fire stuff, because if you put it in the high fire kiln, it'll just melt. So this is a way to still use the clay that you have no clue what temperature it fires to or what it is. You can shape it, make a mold, let it dry out, and then use it as the hump mold to either make more molds, which is what we're going to do later in the video, or to actually make a piece off of it. So you get a little extended use out of it. You don't have to worry about air pockets. You don't have to worry about if it's, solid. Just shape it, let it dry, and use it. The only downfall to using and making a lot of unfired clay molds is they break very easily, they chip, and they also release clay dust. So if you're really worried about that extra dust in the air, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use the unfired clay mold to make molds from it that you can fire that are lighter weight. But they're great to just make a mold, use it once or twice, reclaim it. Just make sure that you don't get it confused with your other clay. So you can see here that the clay that we just did is too damp to go ahead and put a slab on. So we're going to remove that, and we're going to use the one that I had made earlier. It's already started to dry. You can see the difference. So when I roll out a clay slab and put it on top of that, it's going to release. It's going to release just like it would a plaster mold. So you can see essentially what we're going to do is we're going to put a slab on there and lift it off. So to make a mold instead of the actual bowl, I'm going to use clay that's a lot thicker. So you can see that that is definitely thicker than 1/4 of an inch what I would use for an actual piece that I would, a vessel or a bowl. But I'm still going to smooth it out just the same. We want to make sure there's no canvas marks. We want to compress that clay. And so I'm going to smooth that out really, really well before I lay it over the mold. So smooth side down. And I'm going to put it down really, really slow, really inching it through. If your clay is too dry and you push on a mold that's that thick, it'll just crack that surface. And you can see it's starting to crack a little bit right there and there. But what we're going to do is we're going to smooth that out. So we'll just slowly compress that down. We'll cut away the excess of that clay, push it down, and then we'll start to smooth out. So not only can you use the interior shape, but you can use that exterior shape. So it's going to be it'll be a double duty mold. So I'm going to take my really dull X-Acto knife and cut around. You want to make sure if you're using canvas not to push down really hard, or use a really sharp knife. I actually cut a little hole, you can see right there. I tore it. So anyway, so I'm going to go back and focus on smoothing that out. I don't really care what the rim looks like so much on this, especially if I'm just using it mainly for a hump mold. But I'm going to hold my hand really still. I'm going to hold it, make my knife still, and I'm going to turn my mold around the knife so I can get a level cut. Later in the video, I actually have a couple of popsicle sticks that I had glued together, and it's almost like a little brace, and I'll stick it on top of that and hold it. I didn't have it near me when I was doing this portion, so just kind of held it still. And you see how easy it releases and how smooth that interior shape is. So if you were to make a bowl or a vessel, you would see how easily that takes its shape and it removes pretty easily and has a nice smooth surface. So it's so easy. You see how it slipped and it moved, so I had to readjust right there. And we'll go ahead and put that back down. And then we'll do some more smoothing. You can see to the right hand side, right where that red rib is going, there was a little bit of tearing, and you can see normally we tell you not to put a lot of extra water on your pot, especially if you're going to fire it. But for this, I'm just using it to smooth the surface out, and I'm not really worried about, you know, the integrity of the mold at this point, because it's pretty thick, and it's not like a little thin piece of clay, and that water is not going to deteriorate the surface of the piece. I'm going to smooth it down again. It wasn't really a quick pause. It was a little bit more of a long break. So this has actually had a chance to completely dry. And you can see how the mold that we had that was like our little piece of bread has now created us to have a slump mold. And if we turn it over, it becomes our hump mold. So now this piece can be fired for us to make pieces off of. And so this is a lot lighter, a lot easier to maneuver in the studio. And it'll be, you know, obviously more permanent because it's fired and not just, you know, a lump of clay. Here, this is the original one. And here is the one that we finished earlier in the video. And it's solid as well. So we've used our unfired molds to make a mold that will be fired and will be a permanent mold for us. So that's what we've made first off of this. If you want to, you can always use these to actually make a little vessel. So we're going to do that next. So I'm going to set this off to the side and get it to the studio at some point so it can be fired. Now, what I've done is I went ahead and rolled out a slab of clay. It is 1/4 of an inch thick. So to show you guys, I have these planks of wood and just got them at the hardware store. These were purchased for a project years and years and years ago, but they came from the hardware store. So the thickness here is 1/4 of an inch. I laid it down on either side and rolled with my rolling pins. So my clay becomes the same thickness. And so essentially I have a little slab roller. If you can imagine 2 pieces on either side, this is the wood becomes your stop, and you kind of roll back and forth. To save time, I just kind of went ahead and rolled out the slab. And so you can see there's a couple of spots that might have air pockets or air holes. Even if you get your clay out of the bag, always wedge, always smooth it out. We smooth out, 1, to get rid of canvas marks, 2, to compress the clay, and 3, it kind of allows you to see where potential air holes and air pockets could potentially be. So I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to do this on the same side. So I'm not really, the massive gardener, although I aspire to be one day. So instead of me going to my garden, I just went to the front yard and found something growing. I don't even know what it is. It could be a weed for all I know, but I thought the leaves were really pretty. And so we're going to use that to do a little leaf impression on our clay. So hopefully you can see on the inside, there really are some nice little veining and lines left over from the leaf. So you want to take and you want to find the vein side is going to go down onto your clay. So we're going to push this down. And things that have thin stems are going to work a lot better. Like I thought this was really cool. This had a really nice vein line, but you see how thick this middle line is? If I put that through, the thickness of that is almost the thickness of my clay. So essentially it's going to create a really, really weak point. I don't know if anybody's ever tried to do leaf prints in your clay and you find that it cracks on those lines because they're really deep. So you want to try and find something like this that's relatively thin. So we're going to just plop this down. I'm going to use my little pony roller, which is so handy. And we're just going to lightly roll that in at first, and then we can go back over with a little bit more compression. But we want to make sure everything's in the right spot as we lay it down. Okay. So you have one or two options. You can leave the leaf in and try to stretch it over your mold, or you can take out the leaf and stretch it over your mold. I prefer to take the leaf out as much as possible. One, if the lines are too deep, it'll kind of compress that and it'll make it a little bit more subtle. Especially if I'm doing it on plates, I would probably not use it as an actual plate. It would be more something decorative. Kind of really don't enjoy my spoon and fork or knife like scraping on the bottom of a bowl that's got a lot of texture on it. That's just personal preference though. So you can see there's really light veining on there from the leaves. And this here is not that deep. So it's actually kind of good. Let me see if I can get this up there so you can see it a little bit better. Yeah, you can see that. It's kind of nice. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this on top at an angle. And I'm going to lift up and just roll it over. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did when we made our little hump mold. We're going to slightly move this down. I want to slowly press it around my little mold. Focusing my pressure around the edge, not so much here just yet. Right? I'm going to come in and just cut around and get rid of this extra clay. Don't fold it up. Never know, we could use it for pieces or parts or make another small one. And a lot of times it's so easy to just want to fold it up together and start over. But let's leave these pieces. We can cut some of our feet pieces out of it. All right, so now this is cupped around. You can see how it's in there. And it's kind of okay if this isn't that great because we're essentially going to cut most of that off. So I'm going to come in with my little rib, my little red rib. Well, it's not the little one, but my rib. And start to smooth that cracking just a little bit. All right. Just a little bit of water on my red rib. Now remembering this is going to be the outside, obviously, and where we put our foot. So I have a little divot there that I'm trying to work out. Come back in with my sponge and just smooth this all out. So this here is nothing more than a whole bunch of popsicle sticks glued together just to make a line so I can hold my needle tool at the same angle and not wiggle it. There we go. Now I can kind of peel all that off. So you can see a side view, cut that off. If it's not, perfectly clean, it's fine. We'll be able to clean it up as it dries. It's still a little bit soft, so what we can do is we can take a little bit of a break and just let this kind of firm up a little bit. We don't want to let the hump mold sit on top of our hump mold, or the slab sit on top of there, because what happens, the side view, is clay shrinks onto itself, right? So if the clay is on top and this is already shrunk and it has nowhere to shrink, it's going to crack, and it's going to crack off of your mold. So it'll dry a little bit without shrinking so much, but what you're going to want to do is, in maybe about 10-15 minutes, just lift this. Look, it's already lifting up really easy because of that dry clay. It just makes such a really beautiful release, and you can see the detail of the veins and the leaves haven't really changed much. They're still there. So we're going to place that back on there, let it dry a little bit. What's going to happen is moisture is going to absorb out from the bottom and at the top at the same time. So it should dry a little bit even. And then we'll come back in about 10-15 minutes and then just double check this and see what it's like. If it's too flimsy, like see how it's moving like that. That's just a little bit too flimsy for me to start putting a foot on and flipping it the other direction. So let's take a quick pause and let this dry, and then we'll come right back. All right, so we've let this sit up for a few minutes, and you can see it's a little bit more sturdy. What we're going to do now is we're going to focus on putting a foot on the bottom of this. So if this is our little vessel, we're going to do that. So this here's just a little corn cob holder that finally, it's been in the family for years. I can remember being a kid using this. It started to finally rust, so it finally is no longer serving its purpose, serving as corn. So what I did was I just took some pliers and took the prongs, instead of them sticking like this, they just kind of moved outward. So this gives us a chance to make our own little foot tool. So I can come in and I'm going to hold the clay and I'm just going to pull. You can make your own. There's a company out there that makes them. Highly recommend getting that one too because it's a really nice tool. But to be resourceful and to look into your kitchen, you got what you need. So I'm going to smooth this out. You can see I'm taking my sponge and just kind of folding it over just a little bit and smoothing that out. I'm going to come over here and make a little oval, crisscrossing that oval, and I'm going to come down and cut at an angle. Right. So now we have a cute little foot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly draw a little line on the inside, and I can lift this up and off, and I can score right along that a little line. So I score water score, so I make that slip on that surface. So score, make your little slip with your water, just a little bit. Don't want too much. And then I just score just really lightly again, just to really make sure that that mixes together on the surface. And so I'm going to take this and flip it over. And for something this large, I do like to use my scoring rib because I can hit a lot of surface really quick and fast. It's really difficult to kind of be teensy weensy about getting into those little tiny spots when you're doing that. But these kind of surfaces, and even here, I'm going to kind of smooth it over. So before I even place that back on, that underneath is becoming one. All right, so I will flip it back over, pop it right on down where I had it. Take a good look. And then I like to paddle just a little bit. Again, take that brush, smooth out that interior and where that exterior meets. And just like you would use your finger on the wheel, for those of you that are hand builders and wheel folks, it's kind of that same principle. Just spin and get that on there. All right, so we're going to let this sit up for a few minutes before I flip it over because it's still really wet. And then once the foot is set and I can flip over, then we can talk about the rim and the edge and how to address the top surface. So we'll stop right here for just a quick second, let it firm up, let it dry a little bit, and then we'll come back. Okay, so before we flip this over, we need to either sign our piece or use a stamp. So for this one, I actually made a signature stamp out of a 3D pen and just attached it to some popsicle sticks that were glued together. Just rocking it back and forth so you can see then there's my signature. I can take it off of the mold after it's set up for a little bit. And you can tell the rim is a little bit too wonky. It's just not pretty. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at it and address it and see what we need to do. So we're going to cut and make it even. And I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did before, where I kind of hold the tool on top of that uh, chunk of popsicle sticks that are glued together, and hold the tool still and spin the piece evenly around until that needle tool slightly goes through. I don't want to push too hard, so basically I'm scoring the surface each time I go around, and at each level it pushes in a little bit more. If you push too hard too fast, you'll just distort the shape of your piece. So it's almost there. Just a few more turns, and then I'll be able to peel it off so I can lift it up and off. And then I'm going to address that edge, kind of pinch it just a little bit to soften that spot where the needle tool kind of cut. I'm going to use my sponge, very, very lightly damp sponge, to and smooth that out. Okay, so once we like the rim and we know that it's smooth, we can move to addressing it in a different fashion. So I'm going to take this roller stamp or a roulette stamp and roll around the edge of the rim, just to kind of give it a little bit of a detail. It's not something you're drinking out of. It's not something you're probably going to even be eating out of. So having a decorative edge, you can have a little bit extra liberty to make it a little bit different. So if you wanted to make this a soap dish, like, you could drill 3 holes in the center. That would be a really cute little thing. Put your rings in there on the side. Just remember, if your soap fits like this one does before it is fired, it's not going to fit afterwards. So always think about shrinkage as you're creating your piece for your final project. And I hope you guys enjoy making these little vessels. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time. Alrighty, bye-bye.